Merry Christmas, everyone. And what we have right here to celebrate the silly season is Christmas in a glass. This is last year's Imperial Christmas Stout, except this one right here is the barrel-aged version. It's finally ready to drink. So today we're going to show you how we did it, how we aged it, what kind of barrel we used, and now just what it tastes like. Let's get started. Now, the first thing we need to do to actually make a barrel-aged beer is put beer in a barrel. So we're gonna cut way back to past Kelty, just about a year ago now, where I finished brewing this Imperial Christmas Stout. We finished fermenting it out, and I transferred half of this batch into a barrel. So let's cut over to that, where I'm gonna talk about how I'm going to do that transfer and the reasoning behind the barrel that I chose and what I think was going to be the final result. Now we are ready to transfer. So we're gonna whack half into the barrel, just like last time, and we're gonna whack half into a keg. So let me get this quickly set up, and then I'll talk about like stats and numbers and stuff. So I've got like a little bung here that's slightly loose on this tube, and I've already pre-purged this barrel here. So you used just like the CO2 to kind of flush it out and make sure that there wasn't any excess oxygen in there, and try and do our best to, protect this beer. And so because of that purge, I've got this little gap in here so this thing doesn't explode as we try to fill it up. It's just gonna slowly let that little bit of gas out as it gets filled up with the beer. I've also run some of the beer sacrificially through the tube and used it to take a hydrometer reading so that we're not putting, what's the word I'm looking for? Oxidized beer into the barrel after all our hard work. And that little hiss you hear there is the carbon dioxide leaving this barrel. So now let's whack this tubing in till it hits the bottom. It's about there. Put the little bung in place. All right, turn on our digital scales and we should be good to go. We are transferring, I hope. Yes, we are transferring. So, have I got gas on there? Yeah, I do. So, while that's transferring, I'll talk through stats a little bit. We ended up finishing at a final gravity of about 1.022, which gives us, if my maths is right, about a 9.945% beer. So we're like 0.5%-ish off. But then doing some quick maths on the vodka that was used to make the tinctures and do the extracts, I think we actually clocked to 10%. I'm also willing to say that there was probably a bit of a mistake with the gravity reading on the brew day, because I got some readings that were above 1.1, I got some readings that were like 1.097, so I've just got a feeling that my refractometer and my hydrometer aren't great at being accurate at that higher gravity. I just don't think they're calibrated for it, and you can get specific hydrometers that work better within set ranges. So you can have one that's for like medium gravity, then higher gravity, then extra high gravity. I should probably invest in getting one of those, because I just don't think the original gravity reading was all that crash hot. So I'm willing to call it 10% because I think there was a little bit of bias there and I erred on the side of caution. So 10% stout, finally got there. Now I'm gonna finish transferring this off camera. I'll whack the other half into this keg right here, and then you guys will see us very, very soon when we start drinking this thing. I'm back. We are not drinking yet, obviously, but I did forget to say that this barrel used to hold single malt. So not a peat, well, very, very lightly peated single malt, kind of in that Scottish style. That's what used to be in this. I figured that would work really nicely with a heavily spiced 10% stout. Now you'll see us tasting. All right, so here's the game plan. I've got the barrel sitting here. I've got that. I know this all looks a bit complicated, but trust me, it's simple. Barrel's here, tubes coming out from the barrel, coming over into this filter. Now the reason I'm using a filter for barreling this time round, as opposed to the last time you guys saw me bottle from the barrel, is because there is a bit of debris and stuff floating around in here from the barrel char, which I don't really want going into the bottles. So I would like to filter that out using the small mesh in here. That is then pumping around into the beer line of the keg. That gas line of the keg is then up and connected to the top bung of the barrel, hence making a closed system, no oxygen, and good tasting beer. Let's see if all of this actually works. Moment of truth. Hey, we're good. I think. Maybe. Something I haven't really considered is the height of all this. Because I'm doing this without pressure going into the barrel, this is going to be excruciatingly slow. Well, I'm not going to make you guys sit through all this. We'll cut to when beer actually starts flowing through here into the keg. If you are enjoying this video, please don't forget to drop us a like and give us a subscribe. It helps us out a whole lot. And if you are so inclined, join our Patreon in the link down below to get more directly involved with us, or even consider picking up some merch like this Beer, Banter, and Bloody Good Times shirt for all you awesome brewers out there. And it looks like we are starting to get our first movement. Are we going to keep flowing or not? We're going to keep flowing. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. A little bit more time. It is also worth pointing out that I did actually purge all of the beer lines and the filter and everything. So for anyone that's kind of like, oh, but you didn't, flush it out with CO2. It's going to oxidize the beer. It's all good. Already did it off camera, but I did run CO2 through the filter and through all the lines, through the gas lines, through the beer lines. So there's no oxygen in any of that, which means there's going to be no damage to the beer. We are sweet. We got there eventually. It is actually starting to flow now. It just took a little bit of a hot minute for the liquid to start flowing down, which starts to pull the rest of the liquid down through siphoning and everything. But it is flowing, and I have added the scales underneath because I just realized without those, I'm gonna have no idea when this keg is full until it's over full, because this is a 20-liter barrel, 19-liter keg. You get the general idea. I'm gonna let this thing keep on running through and letting the keg fill up. I'm then gonna cold crash this carbonated, and the next time you guys see me will be when I am bottling it. So I'll see you then. I'm obviously not bottling, but I did just realize I do have a wee little sample here, and it's probably worth talking about why I'm starting to barrel this, because this was a very big, boozy beer. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of spice. There was a lot of intense flavors. And I wanted the barrel to complement but not overpower those flavors. So, just having a quick taste now, I feel like we're at that point where the wood has given all the maximum benefit that it can give to adding to this symphony before it just starts to overpower and dominate all the other flavors going on. It's still very intense on the roast, very spicy, a lot of vanilla, a lot of coffee-like flavors and just kind of Christmas spice happening. But there is also now a lot of that whiskey influence coming from the whiskey that the single malt that used to be in that barrel, as well as that tannic flavor that you do start to get from the wood. And it's at that point where I believe if I leave this go any longer, that wood is just gonna start to become more and more astringent and over oaked on this particular beer. I don't know why it happens so much faster on this one than it did on the oatmeal stout. Just, different barrels behave differently. The oatmeal stout was in that one there, this one's in this one here. It could just, even though I bought these same barrels from the same provider and it should be the same wood and all that kind of jazz, barrels are a very weird and magical thing where you could have the same oak from the same tree, coop it into identical twin barrels, but one will behave different to the other. It's super bizarre, but for whatever reason, it does work that way. So, all that being said, I think this is at the point where it's benefited all that it can from the barrel, because also remember, these will kind of act like wines. They will keep developing and maturing because of the tannins that are in this living culture, so to speak, unlike with whiskeys where once you pull it out of the barrel, it stops. With beers that are barrel aged, with wines that are barrel aged, it will keep developing basically forever. So, I'm happy with where it is right now. I want to taste this once it's carbonated and cold, which means now you'll actually see me bottling the beer. We wound up in the end with about 16.5 liters in the keg. So that's about 20 champagne bottles worth, and let's get into it. So we've got our keg down in here in the little baby bar. We have a gas tank just behind here. I don't know if you guys can see it. That is pumping about 3 psi of CO2 into our bottling gun so that when we do go bottling this stuff, so we want to actually purge this thing first before we go bottling it. Obviously all these bottles have already been cleaned and sanitized, so make sure you do that if you're going to do something similar first, because you don't want to ruin all your hard work with a filthy bottle from the factory. And then we are pumping it about 8 to 9 psi into the keg itself to push this stuff into the bottles. Because the last time that I did bottling from a pretty heavy stout was the oatmeal barrel stout. And I had a little bit of foaming issues going on for those first few bottles. So I ended up having to bring the PSI down. I might bump it up a bit more than this though, because this is gonna take ages. Let's see if I can multitask. Should go a little bit quicker now. I'll check what PSI I've moved that to in just a second. And then we got our crowning, lever thing. What do you call it? Bottling thing. The thing you do to bottle stuff. You get what I mean. Anyway, we're gonna pop this on here, put the crowning thing down, and bottle 1 done. Only like, hang on, there we go. 20 to go, that was easy. It gets easier as you keep going. All right, I'm gonna crack into this and actually just try and smash through this thing. And we will come back when all of these are bottled so I can finish it up with a little bit of bottling wax and make this stuff nice and pretty. Now it's time to wax ourselves. Didn't sound right, but you know what I mean. It's time for a little bit of paraffin wax because we've gone through so much effort to age this thing for all these months, to treat it so carefully when we've gone through the bottling process. We've got these lovely champagne bottles that we're whacking it into. So let's just take it that extra step to really savor the moment, I suppose. I've got a bunch of red paraffin wax here. I figure red's a good color for a Christmas beer. And I've got it on a hot plate. This is probably not the ideal way to do it, by the way. The better way is like if you've got a pot of boiling water and then you've got a metal bowl with the wax in it, and then the steam will coat the rest of the bowl with the wax in it, and it'll melt more evenly and it won't catch fire because I've accidentally made it too hot before and the whole thing's caught flames. Anyway, I've done this setup. If you're gonna do the same thing, do the steam method. It's better, it's more even, and there's less chance of either overcooking or undercooking the wax. So, bottoms up, bottoms down, tops, bottoms up. Yeah, bottoms up. Let's give it a nice little dunk. Let it drip off a bit. There we have it, bottle 1 of 20. And I love having the wax just kind of run down the bottle a little bit. I think it adds to that kind of handmade, handcrafted, special touch. Kind of like a, Maker's Mark bottle, the whiskey where they've got like the drippings coming down. I don't mind that. I think it's appropriate with the style of beer that we're making, almost like a dripping candle wax. Now, I am going to crack through the rest of these, and once I'm done with this, I'm gonna pour myself a little glass and give you guys some tasting notes on how this one ended up actually turning out. So I'm gonna get some nice B-roll for Odin so he can do his fancy editing, and then we'll taste our beer. And now for the final result. The first thing I have to say is I just love the appearance of this beer, and this has not changed between the Imperial or the original Imperial, the barrel-aged version. The looks are identical, but I just love how completely pitch black this beer is in color, and then how chocolatey that foam is, that head. It's not white like in a Guinness or anything like that. It's got a really, really dark tinge to it, and I don't know how much you're getting on camera, but it is quite dark actually. One of the darker heads I've seen on a stout. But let's go in for the aroma and the flavor, because this one is just mind-bogglingly more complex than the original. Like they're on the nose. On the nose, it's got that roast, it's got that chocolate, it's got that dark molasses thing going to it, but it's also got these whiskey notes coming through the surface, those single malt notes, which is really delightful. It just makes this smell so much more like something you could sit in an armchair and enjoy with a cigar. There's just something beautiful about barrel-aged stouts that are just so much more than their unbarreled counterparts. But the flavor is where it really counts, right? It's so good. There's something about time in a barrel that just adds layers and layers of complexity and depth that you can't cheat in any other way. And like, I know you can do wood chips, or you could do staves, and you can soak it in the beer, and that's fine. You'll get wood flavor, But you don't get that biotransformation that you get when you have something breathing through the barrel, because that interaction with the micro-oxygenation coming from the outside and interacting with the gases back and forth with the liquid inside is the magic that makes whiskey and wines happen, and beers as well, because it's more than wood flavor, it's complexity that it's built upon itself. So there's that roast character first and foremost, there's that sweetness to it because it was quite a high finishing final gravity beer. It's got that like kind of molassesy and a little bit of like Vegemite or Marmite. I don't know if you Americans out there know what that is, but we're famous for it here. It's got that note to it, which a lot of stouts have. But then after all the obvious stuff, and the dark bitter chocolate, and after all the obvious stuff, there's these layers of like dark fruits and figs and how would I describe it? It's like a blackberries, plums, and dark stone fruits, if that makes sense. It's the same kind of notes that I really love in an Australian red wine, like a Barossa Shiraz or a Cab Sav. It's those intense, big, bold fruit characteristics that I did not expect to show up in this. I expected woodiness and earthiness and those more robust kind of flavors leaning towards the whiskey side of things to do with the actual wood itself. I wasn't expecting all this fruit character to pop out of nowhere. That is a very, very nice surprise, and that's what I mean by that biotransformation in the barrel. It's just remarkable how much depth you get, how much extra depth you can get from what is already a beer with an incredibly complex malt bill. And it's, I have to say, it's more complex and more interesting than the barrel-aged oatmeal stout, linked to that video up there that we did a while back. And I have to imagine that's because this one went into the barrel at 10% ABV, whereas the oatmeal was only about 6 or so. So I think that extra booze also helped to just pull a little more flavor and a little more tannin and a little just more from the barrel than the oatmeal stout did originally. But for everybody who supports us on this channel and follows this journey, we have a very, very interesting video coming out next week for our actual full Christmas special. Your hints are, it is definitely leaning way into the Christmas themes, and it's a very ancient style of beer that makes very good use of one of the icons of Christmas. Those are the hints I'm going to give you until next week. It's going to be an amazing brew day. I highly recommend tuning in for that one because it was just such an awesome experience for me to make this beer, and I would really love to see this beer style come back into popularity because it was so much fun to make, and the result is just mind-boggling. So definitely tune in for that. So until next week, cheers guys. We'll catch you then.